everything that happened this morning was so cool because everybody talked about authenticity and storytelling, which is just fantastic. The other fun thing for me is our little company has only really been involved in the world that you guys all live in for about 2 years, so I am completely unencumbered by expertise. I'm just a storyteller, so that's a lot of fun. So I get to make mistakes, and if you laugh, it's okay. I won't hurt my feelings. So let's talk about, so this morning actually was a really great tee-up, I think, about the what, which is telling authentic stories to our guests. I want to talk a little bit now about the how, because there's some methodology that makes that useful. So you guys all know this, but I love this facts. Probably more than 100 ships by 2026. That's a lot. Here's the great news. The real good news is they got to take the passengers somewhere. They're all getting on those ships and they want to go see stuff, and hopefully a lot of you are engaged on the destination. And here's the bad news, particularly in the Caribbean. Everybody's got palm trees, beaches, fruity drinks with umbrellas, zip lines, you name it. We tend to, in the outdoor recreation business and the destination business, get very derivative of each other, and we don't need to. Here's our premise. We think, particularly in a destination, you want to make sure everybody leaves your port or your destination or your experience somehow passionately in love with your story. And we want them to say all those kinds of things. So this is a fair question for you. Why should I care? Why do I care if somebody leaves my destination in love with my story? So we'll make this argument at least, and I'll ask you to stipulate it for the next 15 minutes. We think it goes like this. You want what we call destination performance. You're not doing this just for the fun of it or for an altruistic reason. You guys are in business. So we would say there are 6 key ingredients in destination performance. First, you want increased attendance. You want that attendance curve going up over time, year over year. Second, you want length of stay to increase. The longer people stay, of course, the more they engage. Third, for every day or hour that they're there, would you like their per capita spend to be higher? You want them to have a great time and spend more money. Fourth, you really want them to have a high guest satisfaction. Say what you like social media or not. When people, and I'm almost 65 years old, so when people in my generation say, social media, I don't know. To me, that's like when I was a kid, if I had picked up the telephone and my grandpa came and said, you put that phone down, you get on the horse and ride down there if you want to talk to me. That's nuts. Social media is our life. The number one most believed source of information in the world is my peers on Facebook. So we want that guest satisfaction, right? We want them to be happy. We want them to come more often. If they come to my destination every 24 months, you can do the math. If I can shorten that to every 18 months, we really, really see a long lever. There's a great force multiplier effect of that. And finally, back to social media again, we want that TripAdvisor article to say, oh my God, if you haven't been to insert name here, you haven't lived, you really gotta go. Our argument for today is that if we could come up with a methodology that would enable us to make those 6 things happen, and you could rely on it, that might be a good idea. So I'm going to give you the rest of the talk a little bit about how we think that works. So here's the recipe. We think you have to start the right way. You have to get inside the box. We're going to talk more about all these. We want you to think about building a big tent, and I was really delighted in the last panel to hear people talk about that. And then we want you to approach design really holistically, really all the way around 360 degrees. So let's talk about how we start. Here's where we don't start. This is a really beautiful rendering. It's a beautiful rendering because we did it, and I really like it, and it's going to be a wonderful place. But it's a terrible place to start designing an experience. You don't design destination performance from the ground up. You don't start with the site. You don't start with the architectural rendering. You don't. You absolutely don't. Those are all good. You got to understand them. But that isn't where you start. And so many times, and I'll tell you, my alma mater, the Walt Disney Company, we were really guilty of this. We'd paint a fabulous rendering and go show it to everybody, knowing full well we couldn't afford it. Nobody could ever build it. It wouldn't work. It wasn't operationally viable, and we weren't going to do it. It just looked nice. You can't start there. Here's where you can start. You can start right here. Who is that guest? And you heard some great discussion this morning about ways to understand. There are a lot of ways to understand the guest. We would argue that you need to look at it a couple different ways. There's a couple of different points of view. One is very, very clinical. We partner with a market analytics firm called Integrated Insight, and and they are experts at guestology. You can quantitatively go and find out about your guest. You cannot, by the way, quantitatively go figure out what to build, but you can find out about the guest. Who are they? Where are they going now? What are they like? And you can really measure that. And part of this is an important part of the front end of the process. The other way you can do it is anecdotally. You can go talk to them, and you get them to tell you their stories, and you can really begin to understand, because at the end of the day, we're building an experience, a destination experience for people. I made a bad living once as a guitar player. And when you play for a living in bars, you really have to know who's in the bar. Is it public school teacher night, or is it telephone lineman night? It really affects the music you play. If you play the wrong set on the wrong night, you wear beer home. So you've got to get that right. And it's, I would argue, no different when you're designing a destination experience. So what story can we tell that drives those 6 value-creating things to this specific audience? So that's the first place. You start with the guest. Now, let's talk a little bit about the famous box. There's the box. You've all heard about the box. And what we're told is, well, you know, we got to get outside the box. Yeah, we got to get out of the box. What's out there? I don't know. It's kind of gray and murky. Well, there's a lot of things out there. Who knows what might be out there? If that's outside the box, over there in the gray, murky area, then that's inside the box. You know, there's an interior to that box. We're going to suggest this. Here's our box, and here's why, or here's what happens outside the box. You've got unlimited potential. Anything's okay. Greatest ideas in the world, no better. You've also got enormous risk. Because if you miss, and you already poured the footers and built the building, that's an expensive rehab. So how do you balance that? Our argument is, it depends on what's in the box. So here's what we think needs to go inside that box. And it's really unique. There's our guest. We start with him or her, and then what's a unique story that only we can tell? Very interesting. And it's okay to posit that. It's okay to frame that up and consider it a little bit on the front end. Next, what are the market realities? It's important to perform a market assessment. You know, you don't have to know everything you're going to do yet. You have to say, generally speaking, it looks like this. Let's see if there's any data out there that suggests that might ever be a good idea. And that's easy to do. And you can harvest that and understand it. So you form an assessment. And all the assessment says, the blunt instrument, is yes or no. You know what? Yeah, there seems to be a market for this. Or, you know what? Despite the fact that we really like this, that dog doesn't hunt. We can't get there. Come up with something else. So you understand the market realities. And by the way, you understand the realities in your own head and kind of what's going on the ground where you live, too. Then we translate that market reality sniff test into an attendance model. We literally do a head count. Okay, if we're right, and we get smart enough to do this well, how many of them will come? We know who they are. How many of them will come? What might they spend, right? Then we diagnose down further and say, all right, what's our design day? And I won't get into a long industrial engineering lecture here, but here's the premise of a design day. You don't build your church for Easter Sunday, right? Otherwise, you build a church that's 2/3 empty the rest of the year. But you don't build it too small either. So there's a way to figure out exactly how to optimize what experience we're going to put on the ground for our guests. Then we can run the numbers. How many of you get to spend all the money you want? Raise your hand. Yeah, that's what I thought. We all have constraints, fiscal constraints among them. We gotta make money doing this. So it turns out if you do this homework inside that box, we can say, hey, this project will support X million dollars of investment with a rational return on capital. And if it's your money, that's great for you and your shareholders. And if you have to get investors, it's really important to be able to tell that story truthfully and make sure that that's the truth. Now we're ready to start getting a little bit creative and come up with what we would call an experience design plan. And here's the punchline. If we would argue that if you get in the box and you find those things and discover those things in that box, that you can maximize that unlimited potential and lose the risk, and you get more fairy than dragon out there in that outside the box world. So get in the box and understand what's in there. All right. So if we do that, the next thing is, all right, well, how do we go about doing this methodology? So you build a big tent. Here's a big tent. And here are the people that normally get invited inside the tent. The boss, right? Your executive leadership, whoever that is in your world, boards of directors, CEOs, sometimes government, sometimes tourism authorities, but they get to play. They always get to play, right? And then, yeah, the architects and the engineers get to play, because usually we're talking about building something, or at least, creating access to something that requires construction. And then, of course, those guys, they get to play because, they own the purse. The problem is if you stop here, and I cannot tell you how many projects we have gotten involved with over the years that did stop here, you miss so much. Our argument is, that's fine. Invite those 3 players, and then invite everybody else. Because the bigger population you have inside that tent, when you're beginning this holistic design process and this story-making process, the richer the tale is going to be, the more informed your perspective is going to be. If we build or design or construct or envision or imagine an experience, no matter how good it is, if it isn't operable, if our operations team can't make it happen for the guests, we miss. If we can't make money at it, we miss. If we can't get it permitted and supported by the government or the tourism authority, we miss. If the taxi drivers don't like it, we still may miss. So invite them all to the Big Tent. And by the way, you could fill this diagram up with all kinds of other people. Your mom, your kids, whoever you want to have come, right? It's really a good idea to invite some of your best guests, people who you already know like you. Hey, we're trying to figure this out. You like it here, come participate, right? We've even had clients before who invited their competitors, as long as they weren't rancorous head-to-head competitors. All right, so now we got our big tent. We know it's inside our box. We're going to move ahead. These are the 3 things that work together. We call these the value vectors. Your brand, the way you train your people, and I mean everybody who touches a guest, pre, during, and after visit, and the actual experience on the ground. Those 3 things are all linked to each other, and they're all built from the ground up by a single design narrative, a single story that helps you create that. And here's a methodology for doing that. So we understand the ground truth. We co-create. We heard about co-creation earlier this morning. We think that's a wonderful idea. That's our big tent. We get in there and we start playing with each other. We author a core design story, a real narrative at the beginning, a middle, and an end, and real people and characters and setting and details and emotion and conflict and voice and all the things that a real story has in it. And that becomes our design plan. And then we translate that into executionals, and then we design, build, and implement. And then before we go yap about it, before we stick it out there on TripAdvisor, before we put it on our website, we make sure we have consistently trained every single person who will touch a guest so that they know how to live that experience personally and deliver it personally. Then we can go to the marketplace in all kinds of forms. So we're going to drink from a fire hose here real quick. We got about 5 minutes. And I'm going to walk you through some of the details on these pieces. So when we talk about understanding the actuals, that's that market analysis, right? But it's also what's in your head. It's really looking at what you already think and questioning whether that's correct or not, right? What are the myths and legends? Myths and legends, by the way, are not lies. Myths are real valid stories, right? They tell us about the world. We need to understand that, both locally and internally. We want to look at our brand. What's this brand experience we're going to make, and how does it look against everybody else? Because we'd like to find some clear space out there. And there, by the way, there always is. If you get the story right, you will find a way to stand alone in a spotlight out in the market. Now that we know our actuals, we want to flip the whole paradigm around, get in our big tent with all of our colleagues, harvest the very best thinking they have, and create this wonderful, overarching, detailed guiding narrative that is the optimal future experience. This is the realistic ideal. It's not complete blue sky. It's not, we're not going to suspend gravity or the laws of physics or any of that, but it's a pretty big thought. It's a pretty big idea about, boy, if we really did this right, knowing what we know, here's what we can do, right? And so that clarifies your messages. By the way, the process of that Big Tent collaboration creates wonderful advocacy. Nobody leaves saying, well, that was terrible, because their DNA is in it, their fingerprints are on it. It's now theirs. So now you've got a big group of advocates and evangelists out there promoting what this future idea could be like. And it gives you, from a pragmatic standpoint, we find, a tremendous facility for creating early programmatics, so we can really start saying how big is it, what's it made of, how much does it cost, etc. All right, now we've got that. So now we want to turn that into a plan. We call them experience design plans. You call them whatever you want. It's real simple. It's the bridge from where we are today to that ideal future state that we want. There are rational, methodical, intelligent steps that will get us from kind of an interesting idea all the way to boots on the ground on opening day and beyond. And you can actually map that out and create that plan. It takes a little bit of work. P.S. Go back to our market for a minute. Once we make that plan, don't do it yet. Let's go back to the market and test some of those ideas, because the market will tell us. You can't say to people, hey, what would you like? Because they don't know what they don't know. But if you say, here's 10 things, tell us which ones you like best, why you like them, they will absolutely tell you. And I've been doing this 42 years, and never has the market ever agreed with what I like. Never. So we never get to do the stuff I like. We do what the market likes. Here's the secret weapon when you do that. Make sure you only put stuff on the list that you like, and then you don't care what you think. Right? All right. Now we know what we're going to do. We will argue that this is the step most people miss. You have to assure performance. Opening day is not when this ends. It's when this begins. You want that value? You're going to have to get that value out over years. The best thing you can do, the most powerful, longest lever you can pull, is to make sure you teach the people who have to deliver this, because we're in the hospitality business. This is a business about people. That TripAdvisor post that I made this weekend when I stayed in Daytona Beach didn't talk about the Hilton Garden and the swimming pool, because they're all the same. It talked about Ben at the front desk, who was outstanding and really, really made it a great time. That one guy in one moment, right? So you need to teach this, and you can't just stop with the people under your sway. You know, who's one of the first people you run into when you get off the ship? A taxi driver, a guide. You know, even though they don't work for you, maybe they got to get it. They got to understand how to put their arms around that brand, and you need to reward them for that and explain how it works. So assuring performance through enculturation is critical. Now, at long last, we're ready to bring in architects and engineers and media makers and bulldozers and spray painters and all the other fun stuff we like to do. So we can engage now in an informed way in placemaking and design, you know, plug in all the wonderful treats and, you know, do our ride and show and stick our brand out there with a great marketing program and really get our operations going with a mind to remember that opening day doctrine. That's not the end, that's the beginning. We got to have a refreshment plan. About every 3 years, or less sometimes, something new has to happen, something has to get better, something has to pop up. You can't know what it is when you open. It's okay if you don't know what it is. But in your 10-year rolling master plan, you need to know we need capital here, we need capital here, we need capital here. And you can back up from that by the number of months it takes to say, how do we get a really good thought, or when do we need to put our RFP out there? So you can take a lot of the angst about the future growth and sustenance of the program by just planning it out. So here's where we end up. We're going to argue that, you know, powerful destination performance, because that's really what we're talking about. Grounded in market realities, it is good to know the limits. It's good to know the constraints. Constraints are the greatest stimulus for creativity. Focused on that guest with a unique story. Delivered across the board, physically, emotionally, personally, through media, all over the map. Codified in a brand, and a brand that's active in the marketplace. You need rules. You know, we're in a partnering world, right? We need everybody who's going to partner with us to understand our brand and know what it looks like and know the do's and the don'ts, so they can help us amplify it out in the field. And you need that enculturated, trained, deeply oriented across the entire enterprise, and then effectively delivered to your audiences. So if you do that, even if there's hundreds of new ships, we're going to argue you have the opportunity as a destination to be way more than your beach and your weather and fruity drinks and all the stuff we know we all do, because only you can actually deliver on your unique story. 19 seconds. Did pretty good. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.